Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2.5 minutes. I don't have my speech with me, but that's okay. It was borrowed from me right after the last session. But anyways, Mr. Speaker, I was part of my speech dealt with some of the early history of motor vehicle regulations regarding the safety of motor vehicles, and I want to go back to Ralph Nader. Ralph Nader did a lot for North America, a lot for Americans, a lot for Canadians, in forcing the government of the United States to strengthen the way it set its rules and regulations in the manufacturing of vehicles in North America. And of course, because of that, and because of our bilateral trade agreements, we buy the same vehicles that the United States builds. We build a lot of the components that are used in the vehicles that are sold in the States and vice versa. And what Ralph Nader did, and the Nader's Raiders, was that they forced government to do, back in the 60s, what we are doing today, strengthening the motor vehicle safety acts across North America and across this country to make the vehicles that we purchase as consumers in Canada, whether they're made here in Canada, they're made in the United States, or made in European countries, we are buying vehicles that are much safer, and we are protecting Canadians. And that is very important. And I have to say thank you to Ralph Nader and the Nader Raiders. It's getting hard to say, but they did a job. They led the way, and we now, as a government, the people of Canada, must lead the way and make sure that the new act, S-2, is a good act and it protects Canadians in the purchasing of motor vehicles. And I spoke a little bit right towards the end of my speech, Mr. Speaker. You weren't here, but I talked about the motorcycle industry, and you missed that. But I spoke about the motorcycle industry and how as the sellers, the dealers for motorcycles across Canada, modify motorcycles that are built to Canadian safety standards. Then they modify them before they sell them. And this is one thing the Act needs to look at and needs to enforce. And I hope that as we go along, and as this Parliament follows this Act, S-2, that we continually change it to meet the changing times and the needs of new technology that are coming into the motor vehicle industry. I think I'm supposed to stop because you're standing, so I will stop.
The honourable member is an experienced member, but perhaps he didn't quite realize that the rule against noting the presence or the absence of a member does include the Speaker. Who is often in meetings, as he knows. Questions and comments? The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend from Yellowhead for his speech, which mostly preceded question period. And I'm really pleased, I think in the debate today on S2, he's the first member to reference the Volkswagen fraud case. If there was another, I apologize. But I think that is worth noting, and I wonder as I look at the legislation, it certainly should apply not just to human safety issues, but to fraud that involves allowing polluting vehicles to pollute while their online report system tells the owner of the car that they're not polluting. So I'll ask my honourable friend from Yellowhead, in the spirit of his friend, his hero Ralph Nader and Nader's Raiders, whom he mentioned a few times, does he think S2 will go far enough to protect us if a vehicle manufacturer defaults on environmental safety as opposed to vehicular safety as it's commonly understood?
Member for Yellowhead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I thank the honourable member for that question. I believe that S-2 will strengthen our ability as a government. Are they having problems there, Mr. Speaker, that I might be able to help them? No? All right. S-2 will definitely strengthen the ability of the Canadian government to deal with corporations such as the 2015 fiasco with Volkswagen. Now, is it strong enough? No, I think we could have been stronger in some of the legislation. And that's why I said in my last couple moments of the speech that we need to continually upgrade S-2 and whatever we're going to call it after that, Mr. Speaker, so that we stay up to date with the current change in technologies. Anybody defrauding the public in their vehicles should be dealt with severely, quickly, and it should hurt them in their pocketbooks. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for the honourable parliamentary secretary of the government house leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I enjoyed the member's speech as he was talking about the importance of our manufacturers and companies. And it does need to be acknowledged. You know, those big manufacturers and the thousands of jobs and opportunities that they have provided Canada's middle class over the years has simply been overwhelming, feeding our manufacturing industry second to no other industry for many, many years, and the way in which they're getting engaged in technology and so forth. This legislation that we're talking about today is all about making our streets and roads safer by looking at the obligations that manufacturers and companies have at ensuring that the product that they have and they're selling is in fact safe for our roads and our streets. And the member across the way seems to agree with the legislation, and we look forward to the Conservatives supporting it ultimately going into committee. But my question to the member would be more of an affirmation than anything else, recognizing, yes, our manufacturers and companies have played such an important role, but there is important for us also to recognize that the Government of Canada does need to step up, make sure that we're harmonizing with the USA and the laws that they have, and we are in fact moving forward at one step at a time, ensuring that our roads and streets across our country are in fact better because of legislation of this nature. Would he member not agree?
For Yellowhead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the honourable member for that question. That's an excellent question, and one that I guess right off the bat I can say yes, but I want to add to that. You know, S-2 is a modernizing of our Safety Act, and it's very important, as I said a number of times. We need to keep it up to date. And I think that we need to give credit when credit is due, and we have to look at the statistical data on what our motor vehicle manufacturers in Canada, and I think North America too, what they have done to ensure that they have made their vehicles as safe as possible. Go back 20, 30 years, that was not the case. Today it's the case, and the case is because we have strong legislation, and we are proposing stronger legislation, and we always need strong legislation to ensure that they comply, and they comply willingly, and they will, because if there's financial losses to them because they do not comply, they'll keep their eye on what they're doing. But I think we have to look at it further. S-2 is the start. We're going through an era now where we have people across the United States manufacturing vehicles that are driverless. Vehicles from small recreational vehicles to large transport trucks, they all have these vehicles so they can drive themselves. And they're going to tear all over the country one of these days. We'll probably all see it in this house, that they'll be driving across Canada with no one behind the wheel. God forsake, I hope that doesn't happen. But it's coming. They tell us it's coming. Mercedes-Benz has a large class commercial truck that can drive itself. We all know the electric car in the United States can drive itself very well. What are we going to do? They're taking over, Mr. Speaker. They're taking over. We've got to be careful. But we also need, as a federal government, we need to work and we need to encourage that the manufacturers keep us in tune of their new technical achievements. We need to work, and we need to start today, Mr. Speaker, to work with the provinces and the legislators, the people looking after our roads and streets, because we've got to get prepared for those driverless vehicles. And the only way they're going to drive is by electronics. And we need to get our act together. We need to start today. We need to start today to get those rules into place. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
It's the honourable member for Windsor West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And autonomous vehicles are already being tested in Canada, but my question is quite simple to the member with regards to the Toyota recall scandal that took place not only just here in Canada, but also the United States. At the end of that process, the United States received investment and services from the recall where Canada did not get anything under his government. What were the reasons for that? Why did the United States get millions of dollars for new auto development, consumer protections, including pickup, delivery, and return of a vehicle, and investment in communities? Why did his government get zero?
Yellowhead.
I'm not exactly sure how the member was phrasing this, but I would believe that the United States probably got financial reward from Toyota because their Motor Vehicle Safety Act probably had a section in there very similar to what the current government is trying to do with S-2, where the Minister of Transportation can levy fines against major corporations for such things. It was not in our act before. I do not believe we had the ability to go after it as the United States did. This is one thing that makes S-2 very good, and one reason I support it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Cardston Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the wisdom of my learned friend and colleague on being able to see into the future what the Canadian automotive sector might be facing. And I have one question for him, and I'm just wondering whether he believes that this legislation strikes the appropriate balance between protecting Canadian drivers and the consumer.
Yellowhead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to my honourable friend. I believe that S2 could go further. I think, and I said it just earlier, I believe that we need to really look at what's coming down the road. And it's coming so fast that we need to get the legislation in place. We need to look at S2. It's got the right ingredients. It strengthens some of our authorities, which is very necessary, but it's not going far enough, Mr. Speaker. And I think to go far enough, we need to look at the future. We need to get those regulations in place now. We need to protect the drivers. We need to protect the public. We need to protect the public and the drivers from the driverless vehicles. We've got to make sure everything is safe, so this all works together in harmony. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.